Well, good evening. Welcome back to another episode of At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill. So again, if you like to hear classic or wonderful tales and stories being told in not by a professional, but by another ordinary commonplace guy with an authentic setting of by the fireplace, then by all means pull up a chair and drink a cup of joe or coffee or tea for that matter, or lemonade or water at this point. It's pretty hot here in the sip. So I have another episode here. I would like to read with you another chapter of Phantastes by MacDonald. I know I've already read the first chapter, and if you've been waiting for the second chapter, it's been this long, I apologize for that. It's definitely been a month or two that I've missed a couple of times that I meant to get in there. So I think that was March, and that was also true for May. So I apologize for that. I'll try to do better. Anywho, I'm not gonna freeze up right now. I just simply want to so I have here a collection of George MacDonald's classics. This is a public domain edition of these works. This goes back to the original. So I should have no problem reading this abroad. And I am on chapter 2, as I recall. I can find my place. Okay. It starts out with a quote, as it reads, "Where is the string?" cried he, with tears. "Seest thou it's not in blue waves above us?" He looked up, and lo, the blue stream was flowing gently over their heads. Novalis Heinrich von Otterdingen. I don't speak these languages, so I apologize if I pronounce them wrong, but that's my best stab at it. All right. So we'll move forward. So it reads, chapter 2. While these strange events were passing through my mind, I suddenly, as one awakes to the consciousness that the sea has been moaning by him for hours, or that the storm has been howling about his window all night, became aware of the sound of running water near me, and looking out of bed, I saw that a large green marble basin in which I was wont to wash, and which stood on a low pedestal of the same material in a corner of my room, was overflowing like a spring, and that a stream of clear water was running over the carpet all the length of the room, finding its outlet I need not where. And stranger still, where this carpet, which I had myself designed to imitate a field of grass and daisies, bordered the course of the little stream, the grass blades and daisies seemed to wave in a tiny breeze that followed the water's flow, while under the rivulet they bent and swayed with their every motion of the changeful current, as if they were about to dissolve with it, and, forsaking their fixed form, become fluent as the waters. My dressing table was an old-fashioned piece of furniture of black oak, with drawers all down the front. These were elaborately carved in foliage, of which ivy formed the chief part. The nearer end of this table remained just as it had been, but on the further end a singular change had commenced. I happened to fix my eye on a little cluster of ivy leaves, and the first of these was evidently the work of the carver. The next looked curious. The third was unmistakable ivy, and just beyond it a tendril of clematis had twined itself about the gift handle of one of the drawers. Excuse me. Hearing next a slight motion above me, I looked up and saw that the branches and leaves designed upon the curtains of my bed were slightly in motion. Not knowing what change might follow next, I thought it high time to get up, and springing from the bed, my bare feet, I'll repeat. Not knowing what change might follow next, I thought it high time to get up, and springing from the bed, My bare feet alighted upon a cool green sward, and although I dressed in all haste, I found myself completing my toilet under the boughs of a great tree, whose top waved in the golden stream of the sunrise with many interchanging lights and with shadows of leaf and branch gliding over leaf and branch as the cool morning wind swung it to and fro like a sinking sea wave. After washing as well as I could in the clear stream, I rose and looked around me. The tree, the tree under which I seemed to have lain all night was one of the advanced guard of a dense forest, towards which the rivulet ran. Faint traces of a footpath, much overgrown with grass and moss, and with here and there a pimpernel, excuse me. Faint traces of a footpath, much overgrown with grass and moss, and with here and there a pimpernel even, were discernible along the right bank. This, thought I, must surely be the path into fairyland, which the lady of last night promised I should so soon find. I crossed the rivulet and accompanied it, keeping the footpath on its right bank, until it led me, as I expected, into the wood. Here I left it, without any good reason, and with a vague feeling that I ought to have followed its course. I took a more southerly direction. Pause. Well, that concludes our chapter 2. It was a rather short chapter, but I understand the next chapter being much longer. It's quite longer, in fact. So I think I will let it stay off there. And I will pick up and try to read the next chapter in full on the next turn. So again, I apologize for waiting so long just to read that nice short piece. Excuse me. That was chapter 2 of George MacDonald's Phantastes. And so we're getting ready to enter fairyland, apparently. So, I want to also talk about my own work, The Reckoning of Olote. I'm coming to understanding some terms a little more as I get around to actually talking about my work, and that alone has been an experience and journey in itself. It's one thing to write one's work and all, but to talk about it's another factor, and to market it, let alone everything else. I won't deny that this is some level of marketing, but I want to at least present something that you may actually enjoy in case you don't care to hear about my writing. So by all means, if you enjoy classics like George MacDonald's Phantastes, there you have it. But here I have my work, The Reckoning of Olote. I will go ahead, I'm going to expand a little bit more in saying, so basically what I'm working on here is a legendarium. It's not just a series, it's not just a saga. So I know I've been using the word saga a lot lately because I'm getting educated as I go with this, so excuse me. So, The Reckoning of Olote is a legendarium of multi-layered storytelling. What that means is that there are different layers of overarching narratives, particularly 2. Now, I've talked about this before in general and everything, but I'm just trying to clarify, give you a better, clear understanding of what I'm going for, what I'm doing here, and what's coming up. So The Reckoning of Olote, Ocnarin Book One is the debut. Now the Ocnarin, what is the Ocnarin? The Ocnarin is an historical narrative, and it tells a saga of its own, of stories. So there are 2 overarching layers. One is the Ocnarin. What the Ocnarin does is telling a historical narrative and telling the overarching story of the world of Olote as its history, so to speak, from its beginning, and hopefully as we get there to the end of the history of that world. So this is a second world, fantasy world, epic fantasy, Christian epic fantasy, but also epic fantasy. I mark it as both. Um, while Christian symbolism is very well present, it is an ambiguous tale. It's subtle. Some of it's more forefront, like the gospel very well is present, but there's a lot of messages that are much more subtle and more in depth. And it's an ambiguous tale. Everything's told from an in-world perspective, so anyone could simply enjoy this as just another tale of epic fantasy. And so you can very well read it like Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, or Narnia, etc. as you read it, however you so choose. So, the Ocnarin is telling a historical narrative of the world of Olote. Tilphrase, plural, are the second layer. And what they do is they tell stories. Basically, they're telling stories that take place in the world of Olote. So within that history, within that overarching narrative, within that time frame, you have Tilphrase that are being told. And I won't get into the weeds too much with it, other than just I want to say that basically all it's doing is telling stories, short stories, longer stories, full-length stories, poetry, songs, lays, that sort of thing. And basically what it's doing is it's telling, it gives a much more intimate view to this world that we read about in the Ocnarin. But the Ocnarin establishes the foundations that everything stands on, what we read about in the world of Olote. So one tells the history, the other one tells the legends. While one is telling the story of the world, the other is telling the stories of the people in that world. I'll let that give you a moment, let that digest, and let you mull over that for a moment. And that is the reality of what this legendarium is designed to, how it's designed to work. In context, the Kingdom of Nomen were the historical gatherers and records keepers, so they would be more in credit to the keeping of the Ocnarin in this respect. Of course, I'm speaking within in-world terms here right now. The Ocnarin Eye are more of the story, or the everyone tells stories, but the Ocnarin Eye are most known for their storytelling, so they are credited for the most for keeping up with the telling of the Tilphrase. So this has been basically being, well, one is being told through the recordings in perspective of the Nomen Eye. The other is being basically told through the eyes of the Ocnarin Eye. Anywho, just giving you a little information there. Again, the Reckoning of Olote, in terms of what's it about, the legendarium itself, it's about the mythical world of Olote in general. And it's about mortals as they seek hope and grace amidst trials of corruption, tyranny, etc. We have a Dark Lord who wreaks havoc of things, making war with the Olote mortals. There are dragons, demons, they wrestle for dominance. And we have a creator, in this case a benevolent, graceful, merciful creator, who gives grace to the Olote, and that he gives his gift of redemption for the Olote's reconciliation. Like I said, the gospel is very well present, but again, everything's being told very well within an in-world perspective. So however you choose to read this, however this feels to you, it's going to be up to you. So, the Ocnarin tells a saga of stories, and it covers many generations. Some of them are more happy-like, and a lot of them sad. Some of them go along happy enough and everything, but they do end sadly. It's a history. It's about a falling world. So we do see this decline that takes place, and it does cover that. It does cover its own in-world politics to some degree. Definitely, you want to see mostly a lot of how the Dark Lord works in working out and bringing about the declines in different kingdoms. But these kingdoms also very well do themselves. They are their own downfall. They are their own responsibility, and they have their own consequences. But the Dark Lord is very well the driving force. So, but we do have, I don't want to spoil it for you, but we do have a hope of a gift of redemption that's being given, and that the Ocnarin Book One tells its own complete story within its own complete set of events in this saga of stories. So we do have a climax at the end. I'm not going to go into exposing what that is, but if you're interested, by all means pick up one. These are available on Amazon. The illustrated is online, is being asked for $55 plus shipping. The non-illustrated copies are $28.16 plus shipping. Of course, anyone, if you know me or you're familiar with if you're from my area and you attend my book signings or any place I may be vending, or you just happen to know me, you can get a lot cheaper from me. Straight up. For me, for illustrated, I asked for $35 for these. Non-illustrated, $20. It is also available on Kindle. So keep that in mind. If you have a Kindle account, check it out. So, as a historical narrative, please consider it respectfully to respect it as such with where your patience is concerned with it. But it's not. Don't be so afraid of it like it's a Silmarillion. It's not near as dense. So just keep that in mind. And I would like to think it reads a little more fluently, and I do believe it keeps interest, but that's of course me. However, those who have read it have very well enjoyed it. Still need reviewers. I don't know about you. Reviews are helpful to me, giving ballpark ideas when I'm buying books, but I usually reserve to my own discernment when I'm buying a book. Of course, I like to be able to get a hand on it, actually get to see it. Unfortunately, being sold online, you don't get to see that, so I'm sorry. But I would like to perhaps read an excerpt. So I'm going to probably try to read across this chapter. It's one of my favorite chapters. I'm just kind of give the highlights without spoiling everything for you, and of course this by hardly any means doesn't spoil the book for you. But in chapter 11, the chapter is called "The Light of a Kingdom and Its Twilight." So this takes place in the kingdom of Nentar, and Nentar is basically given the oracles of Thuravar, the creator, in the context. Now, there's been many iterations. There've been a lot of situations of a lot of declines. In fact, it got to a point here where the law was practically forgotten of old, and everybody has basically moving forward doing what was right in their own eyes. A lot of corruption going on, taking place, and years after many generations were passed, the kings of the Olote, save for Olote and for Noman, decayed over that time, each in their own manner, and they dealt ever more foolishly, each more foolish than those before him. The entire kings sought after their own name for glory, rather than remember the name of Ivar. However, there came a time when Geliver, the king of Nentar, fell ill, and he passed from it, whereas Insulor, his one and only prince Ilnar, became king. But Insulor was young and innocent of his father's foolishness, and unlike those before him, his first act as king was to do nothing. He gave no word nor decree, as rather he was silent on the throne, for he feared the mantle of ruling a people, finding it to be a very sobering affair. How do I commit to such a task? Isildur thought in question. But he would not listen to his advisors, not even the Elnar, for he perceived their bias. Wherefore he saw how they sought only the means of their own ambitions. So Isildur felt alone, and though they were... So you see this young king coming up. He's genuine, he's sincere, and he's coming up in a time that it's like he's a relic of the past, in the sense of the fact that he is being sincere. So he's kind of breaking the mold of things right now at this time, where the traditions of the time have been. And so Isildur felt alone, and though they were surely those who were loyal to him faithfully, he could hardly determine who they were. Yet even so, he would not trust their wisdom, as he perceived a lack thereof in the current generation by which the kingdom functioned. He had questions, but he knew not where to find answers. There were the offices in teaching the name of Ivar, but they taught their own words from their own hearts. On this matter he thought, and it dawned on him. What of the word of Ivar? What of knowledge of the laws of the kingdom and the kings of old? Therefore Isildur sought for the records, the history of Nentar and the word of Ivar, but no copy was kept. All that could be found were the opinions of those who taught, and the recorded copies thereof. As for law, all that could be found were the decrees of the kings, the word of kings. But the words of the kings were inconsistent, and as for the source of law and knowledge itself, it could not be found. Then Isildur wept, as his advisors troubled him with their own policies and petitions. But he refused to act on his power of the throne without the knowledge of how the kingdom and its king were supposed to function, and how the kingdom was supposed to function. The mantle of a king was a great weight, as it must be handled with care, wisdom, and justice, and he must justly judge without bias, and he must sympathize with those he ruled in relation therewith. For how was he to do so? Oh, how am I but a child, he said to himself in prayer to Ivar. No Eli, but by his own wisdom can deem himself greater than such, a child. Only thou who hast created Elaith and Olote could be wise enough to rule the people justly. Grant unto me, if only a shedding your wisdom and an understanding of your heart, and how ye would have it done. And then Isildur rose from his throne in respite from the Elnara sessions, and he looked upon the Tyrian that tower above him, with stones of white as pearl in the sunlight, and the Labyrinth embraced it in that same light. At that, the young king tilted his head in wonder, and he climbed the great tower, whereafter he left into the tombs of the kings, each presented before him after its generation, its era. First there were the recent kings of folly, and their tombs were dusted with diamonds, some with freshened rubies, sapphires, and others with emeralds. These were the later kings, who had reveled in the glory of their own names, as if their name was something wherewith an ally could boast. In splendor were their tombs made to the magnificence against their forefathers. Isildur marched down the halls of his forebears, and he took much thought of the manner in which they were all portrayed. Then he came to elder kings, with their chambers of stone, gold, and silver were present upon their graves, but unlike their later sons, they were not glamorous, as rather they portrayed a sobering effect. Words were written on their tombs, yet while Isildur could read them, he was unfamiliar with the passages, as he did not know them. Perceiving this, he knew that he lacked only the source. The young Eli continued his observation at length he came upon the last one, the oldest, Iviriel and Illuin. It read, King and Queen of Nentar and Tarshish. Tarshish, Isildur questioned in thought, and he was awe-inspired as he stepped foot into the old cavern, for neither gold nor silver, neither glamorous jewels were present, but for Elam were the graves aligned and engraved in for one jewel. There was one grave that stood before him, the corpse of Iviriel, which lay well composed and preserved, yet it was old. So basically what we read here is that he finds two books, One is the old histories and records kept in the kingdom that at this point has been long been forgotten and neglected. They just didn't keep up with anymore. And also there's another book called the Fireplace, which is the book of the law given to the Elaith as the Thuruvar had given that law to them. In that word. King Isildur took these and read them. Into his studies, his heart was uplifted, and afterwards he commanded for the text to be rewritten and upkept. Also the texts were made available to all in the land. The Elnar and those of the king's councils, the great officers, were commanded to know the text and to implement them as written. Those that he found to be of unwilling heart or in slack to keep to the written law were removed from office. The precedents of the decrees of the recent kings which did not align with law were ceased and overruled. And he caused a history and record to be made for the decline and the cause thereof. The nobles were purged, and the teachers of Ivar's name were replaced, as other faithful ally were found to abide by the Fireplace as it was written. And so basically what we see is a revival that takes place in the very functions of Nintar's kingdom as it's supposed to be. And the people are revived, attitudes are lightened up. So we have a light that shines, so to speak, in the kingdom. And this kingdom is very impactful on the world of Olote, in the world of the Elaith. And that becomes a significant impact, a great matter. Now, as the tale speaks of Kurar, the Dark Lord, he was well pleased in his long abided patience over the many years with the progress wherein the seed of Korbic had taken growth. And it's referring to the corruption that's taken in place in these kingdoms and their decline. Yet that growth came slow, and though it waxed great in its impact as Siev, or sin as he would, had abounded in the hearts of Eli, the light of Var's words stunted that seed as Isildur rekindled the light. Therefore Kurar was grieved, and in his wisdom he sought to set things in motion. So he bade word with Darahir, and the Erklings were sent out into Kurnan. So Kurar stirs trouble to set things in motion because he's disturbed where of the light that Isildur has rekindled in this world. So he's setting, what Isildur has done is that he, of all the plans and things in motion and progress that Kurar had intended on the world of the Elaith, Isildur has caused a big setback. And what happens is that Isildur, because of the trouble that Kurar stirs, Isildur has to seize the need to act on that. So he gathers all the kings as it was in the days of old, in that fashion, as they all gather and they get ready to go to battle against Gorthron, against the Dark Lord. So the day came when the Elaith marched for war. Nintar and Shoreland across the river Gallon, that they made stances south of Darien across the main road to Gorthron, and so forth. So forth. It goes through a lot more descriptions here of the battle and where things were set and all the tactics that were set forth, how the armies were lined. Armies, I mean. And the battle goes ill. All the armies get set off. In fact, multiple kings get killed in the process of this battle. And a certain kingdom that was supposed to be in alliance with the other kings and fighting against Gorthron held back when they were supposed to advance and reinforce and support. And they held back instead to let Gorthron have the dominance of the field. So they saw opportunity and they betrayed the Elaith. That kingdom was Nundar. I'll just say that much. Instor, seeing Sirzar's betrayal, was smitten, and thus the Elaith began to fall back towards the great river of Gallen, for neither did Shorland return to their aid, because as Shorland successfully held Curran in face of the enemy, they were left too few to advance to further means. Neither did aid come from the south, from Tavarian, because of the work of Dourahir. Thus Insulor knew there would be no victory. And I will continue reading. This is coming to the part that I wanted to read. Carrick was first to retreat, but they were beset by a great force of Dorsaith. As the Dorsaith tore into the Carrick Eye, a great black mist had risen in cover of their battle under Vel. Then Insulor and Linvel understood that there would be no retreat, so they were cut off at this point. Insulor and his particular army, and whatever forces was surrounded with him. In company with him, excuse me. My terminology there. We're still getting used to talking about these things verbally. So Linvel's army marched double quick in taking line against the dark mist as Insulor's forces rallied in line against Gorthron. Dusk fell as the twilight glinted on the armies of Nintar, and the Olivoy Eye and Nintar Eye together fought valiantly. Then it came in that hour that Morfarin opened a third time, and from it issued forth a final wave of Gorthons, basically the main grunts infantry of Korar's forces, in a great mass of numbers. Yet at the rear a new marvel presented itself as all hearts in the battlefield were stopped. A towering figure came into the twilight, emitting a fiery glow and malice, as if the fiery heart of Olote had come before them incarnate. His armor was great and heavy, with metals unnamed. A great beam of iron and diamond he wielded in hand, as if it were a great lance. From a crest in his right gauntlet shined a light that resembled the heavens. It seemed as if a star was brought before them on Olote, that was red as if anger had filled it. A host of Felnath came alongside of him in an escort. Korar had come, and in his might he drove a path through the army of Nintar without cease. As the starwraith in his gauntlets shined at its brightest, the hearts of the Elaith drifted away from Insulor, some faint and others betrayed in abandoning him in cowardice. When you do read this book and you actually read it through, you'll find that the starwraith that just named is a very important relic, to say the least. It's a very important item in the story. In that moment, Insulor knew fully that there was no hope. But then he also understood that neither was there a choice. So Insulor drove forth, and no Gorthon could stand before him. And the wars of Karnan went at his side with the Elnar. The wars were in particular governing people who fought in this battle, so they fought valiantly in this situation. The Nundara ward, Eisman was brave then as he repelled a company of Urklins, making way for the king. For he feared Ivar, was faithful to the Elaith, and was thus furious with the deeds of his kin. Having lived with them, he counted the Nintar Eye and Nomanai as brothers. Advancing forth, the escort of the king of Nintar advanced in spearhead to Korar's flank, whereas the Felnath rallied against them. Then, as Korar drove forth in his path of destruction without heed of the Elnar in the absence of the Felnai, he was met by the entire king, who stood alone before the Dark Lord. Insulor stood tall in stature than most in length, and his presence stood bright in the twilight as his armor was silver. Of hardened steel were Insulor's gauntlets, his shield bore crested rubies, his helm of Elam bore sapphire, and his sword Glorvel glinted long as though it were a white flame. And the Dark Lord stood erect as a tower above him in might. Though you are a great king in Norville, it is no small feat to stand before me, a mortal such as thee. The king of darkness spoke in laugh. But Insulor stayed unmoved, and his countenance was firm though solemn. Though a king of mortals I be, in death indeed find me, Be it here and now, it is no strange thing for any who breathe freedom to take stand against thee, O Korar Dakin. And even so I stand not merely as the king to rule judgment on ye, for that is Avara's place, when then your might shall diminish. But I stand here as simple ally before a fell king who would sow discord among the Lathe my brethren. You will see that all that is good is warped as if it would destroy itself, but nay, it is darkness. That shall be its own doom. Though I fall, I stand as a testament to the truth that lives on by Avara's word, as it continues in the hearts of the Lathe in hope of his gift. Here I testify the hope that lives on, and it shall ever stain your victories as fruitless. Korar stood silent in a grunt of pain, as if a light stung against him through his impenetrable armor. In reply, he sneered, Thou art ever wise among the Lathe, and it almost pains me to In reply, he sneered, Thou art ever wise among the Lathe, and it almost pains me to witness destruction of a heart as noble as yours. So tell me, Insulor, king of Nentar and voice of the Lathe, faithful to the light of Athuravar in his accursed promises as he has said, will you turn to be slain by Gorthon with what hope you can muster? Or will you fall by my hand with no more mercy than the crash of a mountain on a city? And Insulor took stance with his blade ready, and he seemed to stand himself a star in the twilight under the darkness that stood in shadow. A snort came from Korar's breath as he mocked him then. So be it, child of Uvirion. You have rekindled a light in the heart of the Lathe, but as you pass here, the realms of the Lathe will again fade as you fall in rendering its twilight. And twilight and dusk is followed with darkness. Then Insulor charged upon the advancing Lord of Darkness as he nimbly evaded the strength of Korar's might. So swiftly the Eli King danced about the Dark Lord, but where blade met armor, no flesh could it taste. Never could Korar's might cleave the valiant king, for in all of his great might he was slow while Insulor was agile. Thus they continued to dance, but at length Insulor became weary, and he faltered as Korar's strength did cast him into the ground, followed by his great lance. When the lance missed close in breaking Insulor's helm, Insulor hastily mustered himself up and clove Korar's left eye to the Dark Lord's cry of agony. A moment that even the Felinath shuddered, and the Gorthons squirmed out a squeal. But before Insulor could pursue any advantage against the Lord of Gorthrond, Korar became again conscious of the Eli, and in his weary state Insulor could not evade him as Korar's foot found his feet in crushing them. Alas, then, it was that Orgak. Korar's lance found the Nantara's king's mortal form. Thus fell Insulor the faithful. The Elnar had perished at long last against the Felinath, and after Korar's duel, he advanced no more as he returned through Mofarin's gates, and his army followed. The battle finished, and while a few Nentar eyes survived to see the end, none of the Olivoi eyes survived. Even so fell Linvel, their king. Though no grounds were lost in the face of Gorthond, it was no victory, and there were many tears in mourning the dead. But the loss was too great, and the great leaders of the faithful who bore the light of Ivara's truth were gone. Grievous were the songs made for Insulor in his rise, his nobility and valor, and his fall. Moreover, at last none recovered Insulor's body to find place in the tombs of the kings. For Korar had it brought in, and in Corian amidst his Childaks, Korar had it set and preserved in token of mockery against the freedom of the Lathe and the light of Ivara's word. So ended the fourth battle of the Jalwraith, as many sung of his horrors and valors, and others shunned it. And that would conclude that chapter. What ends up taking place is the line of kings was practically, that's not, but that concludes that chapter. And less wise kings follow after. So Insulor had become an impact of significance that he was a huge setback in Korar's devices and plans. So Korar found it necessary to deal with the matter himself, so to speak. So, well, that concludes this episode of At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't bore you. If you like what I'm putting together here with the Reckoning of Olote, then by all means, please subscribe, or get yourself a book and check it out and read it. There's a lot to be told, a lot to be said. I have a lot of irons in the forge with all this right now. Aaron and I have recently purchased, excuse my words right now, I'm fumbling, released our own collaborative work separate from the Reckoning of Olote. The Sea Tales of Flay. Basically what that is we traverse it's being told in episodic tales throughout in series, not necessarily all chronological, so to speak. They're just random tales being told in the series as it concerns interconnected worlds that are supercontinent worlds that are interconnected across this vast sea of Philae that is of universal scale. So you have a vast, large sea, many worlds stand in it. And this particular book is called Descent, as it concerns a man who descends into the depth as he's blinded by beauty and by false promises, as he descends in pursuing or seeking the underworld of the depths of the sea. So the question of the story is, does he find grace to survive and return to the surface of men? So it follows a character by the name of Farinoi, and does follow another character by the name of Olote. I won't spoil that for you. Check it out, read it. It's a small book. It's not expensive or anything. It's only $12 online. Aaron and I still got to decide to discuss what we're charging when selling from us in person, but it won't be much. And I'll get back to you on that. Sorry, I'm trying to talk on the fly at this moment. Like I said, there's a lot of forges in the fire. We do have another collaborative work concerning Reckoning of Olote. There's a romantic story that's told in here concerning a couple of characters, Simon and Aranael. And they have their own story that's told that takes place in the Ocnarin and the saga that takes place as a significant part of the greater story of the Ocnarin. However, their story is also very well worth the telling of its own. So in that, this one reads a much more historical narrative, elevated in tone. While it's a long chapter, it goes really in depth in telling their story. We wanted to take the time to take that story, tell it in its own book, and expand on it, as we both are sharing our parts in writing out the narrative. So I'm writing Simon's part, and she's writing Irenia's part. So we're very well looking forward to see how that's going to turn out. Right now we're in the very early stages of it right now, so it's going to be a little while for rating on. I am currently also working on a Tilfrey concerning, they call it the Tilfrey of Range and Attain. It concerns two children, and I hope to read some excerpts about it next time, maybe. It concerns two children as they stumble along. Mythology gets really wild here. They stumble along the siblings of the monarchy of seasons. What that means is they stumble along the princes and princesses of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And the way the journey goes is they're actually are traversing places where they don't belong, they shouldn't be. And in consequence of that, they end up causing an imbalance of situations on a very drastic scale. So, on a very significant scale, that's what I mean to say. And the villain of the story is someone who thinks he can right the fairness of the unfairnesses of the world through the destruction of the very natures of Olote. The scary part about the story is that he has the very capacity to do it if he was in position and place, the right place and time to do so. So while this nowhere doesn't fit that he should ever accomplish those things, he very well pursues it. And he gets pretty close. So that's all I'll say about it. It's a very fun story to write. It's been very expansive. It's, as I've been talking about with Erin, bouncing thoughts with her, and it's definitely been her favorite story that I've come up with thus far at this point. Despite the fact that Simon and Renaya is our favorite story together, but there's other reasons for that. That one takes elements and inspiration from our own relationship into the story and everything as that story is told. So that story just has special meaning for us. And we read about that story last time. Erin read the excerpt from that story as Renaya held aloft the golden rose in front of the Drakketh to tame it, as it gave Simon the opportunity to become the hero to slay the dragon, the Drakketh specifically. And yes, he is the dragon. So she is his heroine as well as he is her hero. And Erin was definitely my heroine, so I definitely there's a lot of fun things to write into that story, and I enjoyed. What's coming up in potentially this year? Reckoning of Olote, Tilphrase. I have a collection of Tilphrase that accompanies the time frame of this Ocnarin Book One, as they tell a Tilphrase that take place within the time frame of Ocnarin Book One. And it's not the exhaustive set of Tilphrase I want to eventually have written for accompanying this book. So I'm calling this a Tilphrase of Olote Selections. However, I can't publish it. I technically have it pretty well ready. And now I do want Erin to look at it. I want to let her become, again, the editor of the book. Have her name on that. And she does a great job with that. But I can't publish it just yet in any case. The story is submitted to the William Faulkner Literary Competition of New Albany, Mississippi. I'm waiting for it to see how that turns out. I can't. That's a contest that's only for unpublished works. So I'm going to wait and hold out to release my work until after that's decided, which is in September, is the way I understand it. So it'll probably be October before I can release my work. In the meantime, I'm going to continue looking at it and make sure there's not anything I need to touch up or anything in particular I'm interested in changing. It will include some fun materials in it, as well as tables of the mythology of Olote, and it will it also features a foreword, which not only discusses myself and things I kind of include in my handouts as I talk about the Legendarium as a whole, but also includes more information about what I have and what irons I have in the forge, and in the future what I hope and anticipate to write. And those concern Tilphrase that accompany this book. In the grand scheme of things, I have 2 more Ocnarins I tend to write. They each should hopefully tell their own complete set of events, their own story. So I'm not afraid about not finishing this if however life goes. They're their own story, their complete story. So nothing to fear on that. If anything should come up in my life and I don't get to finish the last books I hope to have written, I know it's, in some ways I hope that you're disappointed, but you shouldn't have to be too terribly disappointed as in terms that these are still their own complete works. that's like hoping for a sequel that may not necessarily have to have been. It's not required. It'd be nice to have it, and I definitely plan to. In fact, I had intended for all this originally to have been simply 3 main volumes. One volume, The Reckoning of Olote, consisting of the Ocnarin Book, what I'm calling Ocnarin Book One. But the first volume, The Reckoning of Olote, was going to consist of the Ocnarin, this portion of it, and Tilphrase that accompany that portion of the Ocnarin. And each volume was going to define its own era or phases, as you would, of the complete story of Olote, The Reckoning of Olote. So I had The Reckoning of Olote with the Ocnarin and a Tilphrase called, it's been a while, Yethane. So The Reckoning of Olote, first volume 1, with the Ocnarin and Yethane. Then volume 2 would be The Reckoning of Ithur, or Ithur. I'm still deciding on that title. I think I'm gonna go with Ithur because I think it serves the message of how designing the series best. So part 2, volume 2, Ithur, Ocnarin, and the Iliarth, which translates as Ithur and the Stars. The Yethane translates as the duration of the Olote. Then I have volume 3, The Reckoning of Ocnarin, which consists of the Ocnarin and the Salanth, which is the final age. The final age, that alone, I believe, should at least determine for you what the last book is going to basically be. So, what a basic concern. So that was going to be simply the ending. Sorry to spell it out for you. But anyway. So that's the anticipation I've had from the start. Originally, I was just going to wait till I had at least the first volume complete and whole. But it's been a very long process to get this thing on tracks. As I go, I'm getting a better definition of what it is I'm working with, the faster it's rolling. Right now, though, my goals are basically set on getting these Tilphrase written out to accompany The Reckoning of Olote, Ocnarin Book One. So the next time I'll have The Reckoning of Olote, Tilphrase of Olote this year, selections this year. And I'll continue working on Tilphrase moving forward, more accompanying this Ocnarin. At some point, I'm going to start breaking off a little bit and giving a little attention to Ocnarin Book 2. And I still have to draw the entire outline for that, how I want that to work out. Some things I'm pre-planning, some things I find it best to simply figure it as I go. In this case, I believe that's very well the case. In terms of the Ocnarin, I will outline, pre-plan the entire stretch of that, at least that's my intention. Right now, where it starts, it's a bit of a mystery for me exactly how I want it to begin. So I think once I get that rolling, then everything else should roll out pretty smoothly, like clockwork, just about. So for the Ocnarin, it's going to start out. It should start out rather differently from Ocnarin Book One have started. It may very well begin as the Ocnarin Book One ended, in terms of how the narrative style was being handled in that. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to spoil anything. It will concern Ithur, who is definitely the main protagonist of the entire Legendarium. So, it's a rather broad project. It's called a Legendarium for a reason, for purpose. This is the purpose that I have in mind for it. I won't go into spelling out more details for the time being. I do hope to get to read and share with you more about Managing and Maintain Still Free a little bit next time. And my time is running long now at this point, so I'm going to call it. So again, I hope you liked this. If you did and you want to hear more, smash that like, hit subscribe, please follow, please be patient. I know that's not a fond word for most members of an audience, but we're adults as well, so I'm going to treat you as an adult. So please be patient with me as I work on these things. If you like my work, I'll be right here. So that is this episode of At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill. Until next time.